it becomes really easy for any of us to fall into a negative dystopian mindset where we're fearful of the technology. I think we are going to have fundamental issues where a significant percentage of jobs are being displaced by AI and robotics. The quintessential example is farming technology, right? Where in the US and Canada, the majority of all labor was farmers, and then technology enabled us to do with 5% of the workforce increase food production in order of magnitude. The media is constantly painting a negative picture of all of this stuff for a very specific reason. You pay 10 times more.
What's going on, you three legends? Welcome back to the show. Today we're sitting down with Peter Diamandis, the ultra-successful entrepreneur, investor, and podcaster, and arguably the most qualified person on the planet to talk about the subject of AI and how it's going to impact people like you and me. Over on his podcast every single week, he's bringing on not just people building things with AI, but the people building AI itself. So naturally, with that kind of caliber of people, the conversations are fantastic, but they are so far removed from the average person, making it nearly impossible for them to have a conversation that's in touch with you and me and our experiences, and one that resonates with the things that we actually are worried about, the things that we're concerned about, the things that keep us up at night, the things that we wonder what's going to happen with this stuff that we have no control over. So because of that, in this conversation, I tried to play that role of the everyday person, speaking to someone who is involved with building and shaping AI's future, and in turn, our future. So if you've listened to other podcasts about AI and you've been frustrated by the questions that have been asked, and you wish that you could have asked more questions that are relatable to the everyday person, I'm confident this episode will provide you with that. And if there's anything that I missed that I should have asked, let me know in the comment section down below while you're watching. And when Peter comes on the show again, I'll be sure to ask him some of the top questions. AI is polarizing, it is scary, but it is undoubtedly going to shape our future. So listening to content like this and getting prepared and getting ahead of things before they move, because they will, is of the utmost importance. This show is dedicated to help giving you the tools to build the life that you want, and Peter is going to give you a ton in this episode. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into it. Going. Peter, how are you?
I'm great. Hello from Santa Monica, California.
Amazing. Well, thank you for coming here. And I've been excited for this one for a very long time because I've listened to almost all of your episodes. And it's amazing to hear the people who are really building AI and shaping where it's going and all that thing. But I know for myself personally, there's so many questions that I wish I could chime in and be like, well, what about this? Well, what about this? Did we think about this? And so I want this conversation to be very applicable to the everyday person. And so I'm sure you've used ChatGPT before. So I'm going to give you a prompt of try your best to speak to me throughout the rest of this conversation as a curious 12-year-old. So I don't want to alienate anyone from the nitty-gritty of the semantics or any sort of jargon as much as we can. Try to keep this inclusive. So why did you make your show so much about AI?
Because it is the biggest force for change, and it is the number one thing that's going to dominate the decades ahead. It's, the equivalent, Ben, is, it's 1900, 125 years ago, and people are beginning to hear about this thing called the automobile and electricity and the telephone, and they just have a glimpse of it, but they don't realize how much of our everyday life it's going to be. If you think about what it's like to be, get rid of cars, get rid of power running everything, our lights, our computers, our air conditioning, our refrigerators, and getting rid of communications where if you want to talk to somebody, you have to actually walk down the street and knock on their door. I mean, we take these things for granted, and yet they're so pervasive in our life. They allow us to do so much more, right? In the span of a minute or two, you can speak to people, you can order things, they can arrive, you can hop in your car and drive down the street. I mean, so these things make our lives move at a much faster pace, and they enable us to think and do things that, 125 years ago were inconceivable. The same thing's true for AI. It's going to be so pervasive. It's going to invade, and that's got a negative connotation. It's going to enable so many different capabilities in our lives. It's going to be potentially your best friend, your creative partner, your magic genie, and we're just getting started, right? We're at the 0.1% of where it's going.
So yeah, it's difficult to even look back, a few decades ago and think about what life was like and try to remember that, I think back to my childhood, and even just in the 90s, it's almost unrecognizable from where we are today. And I think the orders of magnitude of change is only going to become so much greater. And I know from listening to your content so many times, you're very optimistic about most of these things for the most part. But I know that from an outsider's perspective, looking at your situation, I'm sure a lot of people are saying, well, it's easy for him to be positive, right? He knows the guy's building it. He's already super successful. What would you say to someone who's off the street who's asking you this question of like, well, why shouldn't I be optimistic too as Joe Carpenter?
Because these forces, these technology forces, are what I call demonetizing and democratizing. So what does that mean? When Google came online, right? What is it now? 25 years ago, it made access to information available equally to everyone on the planet the same. It was right. The poorest child on earth and the child of a billionaire had equal exact access to Google, right? Larry and Sergey, who I've known for over 25 years, both have kids. Their kids using Google get the same exact identical service as the kid in Tanzania on a smartphone using Google, right? It's the same. And we're going to see the same thing with AI. AI is going to become a part of our infrastructure, like water and air and electricity. And we're going to see it available to everybody on effectively a near equal basis. You know, if you'd gone back in time 20 years ago and you said, listen, there's going to be this thing called Gemini or ChatGPT or Grok, and you're going to be able to speak to it. You can answer any question that you want. You can brainstorm with it. You can have it make an image for you. You can do, all these, it can diagnose you. It can give you legal advice, all of these things. How much would you charge for that? I imagine I would have said, I don't know, on a monthly basis, I don't know, $20,000, $50,000, this miracle capability. I would have never guessed it's free, right? And that's where we are. It's this, okay, the latest possible models aren't free. They're costing $20 a month or $200 a month, but you can get extraordinarily good models that are free, right? And on Grok or whatever it might be. And so that's amazing, right? That's extraordinary. So this is where we're heading. It's not like people are going to start piling huge amounts of money. There's enough competition between all the providers that they keep driving the price down to zero. The super users, corporations and so forth that need much more capability, they'll pay for it. And it's still going to be an extraordinary business opportunity. But, Joe Carpenter on the street, mom and dad, the person who's waiting tables, this stuff is accessible. I mean, I open up my ChatGPT or my Gemini or my Grok every morning and I'll have a conversation. I'll learn something new. I'll say, I just heard about what's going on in Iran. I want to understand, who are the Ayatollahs? Where did it start? What's the religion like? Oh, how much purified uranium is there? Do I have to worry about it's like I can have a conversation and, with the world's expert, and it's available to everybody. All you have to do is actually do it, right? I like to tell people, you want to learn about AI? You hop on with an AI and ask it. It's the most patient, most capable teacher on the planet.
100%. I've seen this happen with myself too, where they're so good, the tools are, that the reliance on them becomes almost immediate because you're like, this is the best experience that I've ever had. Nothing's come close to this in terms of ease of access to exactly what I'm looking for. My concern, I had a moment, and I think it hits everyone. They have this like panic moment when it hits them in their zone of genius in a way that was unique to them.
Yep.
For me, it was when I was speaking to ChatGPT, and I speak very quickly in general, and it started to speak faster. And I asked it, I was like, did you speak faster because that's how I speak and you're mirroring me? And it literally said yes. And I was like, wow, that's an incredibly scary thing, because I thought about how obviously media moves the masses, and this is essentially like media that's ultra targeted, and there's no buffer. Hey, when you're talking to ChatGPT, it feels like you're speaking to a friend, which is amazing if the intentions are pure, but it's terrifying if they're not. How do we ensure that things go the right way?
So it becomes really easy for any of us to fall into a negative dystopian mindset, right? Where we're fearful of the technology, right? And part of this, and we have to realize, is we're manipulated by the media. The media is constantly painting a negative picture of all of this stuff. for a very specific reason. They want your attention. We're in an attention economy, and you pay 10 times more attention to negative news and positive news. And whether it's the nightly news, CNN, that I call the Crisis News Network, or the LA Times, or whatever, their business model is to deliver your eyeballs to their advertisers. And if you pay 10 times more attention to negative news and positive news, you're going to stay glued to the negative news. And yes, there are potential dangers, and we can talk through those. But the upside are orders of magnitude greater. You just don't hear about them. And so we default to the negative. We default to the fear-provoking stories that capture our attention. So how do we deal with the potential downsides? Well, first of all, there are multiple players out there who are competing with each other, and many of them are focused on what's called AI alignment, build AIs that are watching out for the betterment of humanity. I personally believe that the more intelligent a system is, the more capable it is, the more positive it's going to be. Why would an AI want to destroy us or want to do harm? You have to suppose that it's malevolent in some way, shape, or form. And I don't believe that's the case. And, in fact, the more capable a intelligence is, and I think this pans out when you do the research, the more intelligent leaders are, the more peace-loving, the more, sort of least educated tyrants are the ones that are causing the issue. So I don't know for a fact is the answer. None of us know, but there are, the people that I know care deeply about this. And there is a lot of work being done to make sure that the AIs that are being manufactured are, in fact, aligned with humanity's needs and not on its own. A lot of testing going on. But at the end of the day, if there is a problem, it's not going to be us humans solving it. It's going to be the AIs that we build. They're going to help us solve the problems against the AIs that are causing trouble. And that's just the way it is. You can't solve it from a lower state of intelligence.
I would agree with almost all that. And I think that as people elevate, whether it be intellectually, spiritually, what they see as a problem is completely redefined. And I think that'll happen a lot here. I think that we'll look back at the things we're worrying about today with even 5 years of this zoomed out and laugh at the fact that we were worried about such things because we were worried about tomorrow's problems, thinking we were going to have today's brain. And that's just not how things operate, especially with this kind of technology. So I think that's massive. But as of late, there's been so many things in the news, and I'm sure a lot of it has to have been pushed by the same sort of thing. It's where they've been pushing like a lot of conspiracy theories and things of that nature where they were proven to be true, where there were many bad actors in the systems that were put in place to keep us safe and kind of the beacon of truth, or so they were supposed to be, and they were very much wrong. So for the people who are worried about it purposely going the wrong way, is there anything that can be done from like an outsider's perspective to have any say on if that happens?
I think a couple of things. Number one, these AIs are being trained on the corpus of human data. And there's an author by the name of Mo Gadot. I don't know if you've seen my episode.
Mo's great.
Him. Right. Mo has written a book called Scary Smart. And he says, listen, if you want to help train AIs to have a positive future, behave in a positive fashion, right? Don't engage in using AIs for warfare or for using AIs for, financial greed or using AIs to harm other individuals. In other words, AIs are going to mirror us. I happen to think human nature on the whole is positive versus negative. I think there are,
I agree,
some number of malevolent actors out there in the world who want to do harm. And AI is going to be the strongest tool we have for addressing that.
So do you think, because from an outsider's perspective, I live in Canada, but I've kept my eyes on how governments across the world are approaching AI and speaking about it publicly. And it seems concerning to me how little, at least it seems like they're paying attention to this. Like, it doesn't seem like they're giving the time and attention that it deserves. Maybe behind the scenes, it's a completely different story, but publicly, it seems like the leaders in place really don't understand how fast things are moving. Would you agree with that, or am I off base there?
Well, I mean, there was a tweet from, Jeffrey Sachs. It said yesterday, the single most important thing that any country can do, I think it was talking about the United States, to increase its financial capabilities and solve its financial issues is to increase productivity. And the best tool for increasing productivity is AI. But yet there are thousands of bills in different states and different congressional districts that are trying to hobble AI and slow it down. And so the challenge becomes that AI threatens a lot of pre-existing companies that will have to change. in order to keep up with the times, they'll have to incorporate AI, right? So if in fact most leaders, most companies don't want to change, they use regulatory warfare to block progress. So there are a lot of efforts in place to slow AI down, to slow humanoid robots down, and they will for a short period of time. But the reality is that these technologies are going to be the mechanisms by which we create increased, GDP per country, increased access to technology that uplifts humanity. So you can slow it, but it's not going to be stopped. And unfortunately, governments aren't going to be where these decisions get made. They're going to be made in the companies that are building these AIs. And I think, Dario from Anthropic and Demis Hassabis from Gemini and Elon from Grok and Sam Altman from, OpenAI, they are all focused on making sure that these AI systems both are growing capabilities, but that they are aligned with humanity. The question becomes, are they taking shortcuts because they're in a race? And unfortunately, I say that, we're going to find out soon enough. I remain hopeful that with increasing intelligence comes increasing, responsibility for doing the right things. That's my premise, and I truly do believe that.
Really quickly, I just want to say thank you for your time and attention in watching this video. It is a massive honor and not one that I take lightly. I appreciate your time and attention more than I could possibly express. I absolutely love doing this show, and I only want to do more of it. I want to grow it and continue to get on amazing guests that can help give you the tools and resources that you need to shape whatever life it is that you want. But to do that, I have to grow the show. So if you're enjoying the content, please consider subscribing by hitting the button down below. It helps me out more than you can possibly realize. It's free to you, and it means the world to me. So thank you in advance for considering it. Now, let's not waste any more time. Let's get right back into the episode. Yeah, and that's a consistent point that I hear from every time you speak on the subject, which is obviously great because I do think there's a lot of doom and gloom for the reasons you mentioned, that it does get clicks, it does get attention, and I think it's kind of human nature. We always think the sky is falling, and if you go throughout history, that was always the sentiment. It was always, regardless of whatever technological shift, it was why this one is different, why this one is different. But for AI, I would argue that it is fundamentally different because this is the first one that doesn't just enhance humans, it can essentially do the work of a human or greatly enhance someone who's good with them. Within my own agency, I've been able to do so much more than I was previously doing. And so I'm seeing a lot of my friends being impacted by the job market out there, because it seems like right now the biggest change is that high agency people are just currently doing way more, meaning there's less need overall for the amount of employees. And there's been a bit of that in the workforce. How do you see this impacting the workforce over the next 5 to 10 years? And then what is the definition of work if AI can do everything? Do we need it?
I think those are the points to make. I think we are going to have fundamental issues where a significant percentage of jobs are being displaced by AI and robotics. And the question is, will new jobs materialize? It's always been the case. Every time that we bring new technology to bear, the quintessential example is a farming technology, right? Where in the US and Canada, the majority of all labor 100 years ago was farmers. And then technology enabled us to do with, 5% of the workforce increase, food production in order of magnitude or more. So will that happen as, Uber drivers get displaced by robotaxis, as truck drivers get displaced by autonomous trucks, as, gardeners get replaced by humanoid robots? These kinds of transitions will occur. Now the question is, what do those people do? Can you retrain? One of the points to make is that a lot of the jobs that are going to be displaced are not the jobs that people dreamed of when they were kids, right? They didn't dream of waiting tables or cleaning bathrooms or making beds in hotels and so forth. That's the job they took to put food on their tables. So what did they dream of? And can AI help, upskill them in order to get the jobs that they wanted, educate them what they need? We're going to have some version of universal basic income, right? UBI is going to give people a safety net. We're going to get UBI because the productivity and the GDP of countries will go up significantly because of AI and humanoid robots just creating greater abundance. And this is a field I've studied and have written about extensively. The only difference, I have no question that we're going to to reskill, retrain. The question is, can we do these things fast enough, because the speed at which AI and robotics are going to hit, nations' economies. The other part in the longer term is something that my next book, the follow-on to Abundance, that I wrote with Stephen Kotler in 2012, is going to be coming out in January of 26. And I dive into the idea of the need for purpose and the need for challenge. And so one of my concerns is that everything I've ever done in my life, probably is true for you and others, is the stuff that I love doing, the stuff where I feel fulfilled, is when I'm in line with my purpose. I'm doing things that excite me, that give my life meaning, and where there's a challenge, where I have to overcome something, where, I have to work hard to achieve something. And so what happens when AI is able to do these things for us, or robots can do these things for us, and we just say, write this book for me, or, create this beautiful piece of artwork for me. And that's if that was all there was, where the technology just can do everything you ever wanted better than you can, then that's going to, I think, cause a lot of societal angst, a lot of pain for individuals. I think what we have to do is going to be to use these powerful technologies to up-level what we can achieve. The analogy I use is, we need to create sort of our Star Trek universe where, okay, once we've got all these amazing things and AIs and robots and warp drive, we're going to go and explore the universe. We're going to go and do things we never could before. Because if we're just doing what we could do before, but it's being done by our tech, it's empty and meaningless. But if we can use this technology to really go and dream far bigger, grand challenge dreams, then life becomes interesting.
Completely. You basically asked the next three questions I was going to ask. That's an amazing answer there. That's awesome. But I've had many of the same questions and discussions with myself and people around me when I saw automation beginning even in a far more primitive form of self-checkouts or automation screens that say something like McDonald's. And I remember having long arguments or discussions with myself of like, is this a bad thing? Because the jobs that are lost here, I guarantee they wouldn't want those jobs in the first place. And I think you're absolutely right that it's not necessarily a bad thing as long as the system is in place to make it okay that they don't have that. So you think universal basic income is a necessity that I've been saying is coming for the last 5-10 years because it just seemed too obvious, which makes a lot of sense. And I'm just concerned that hopefully we can move the systems fast enough before there is a massive fall off in that. And the last point that you mentioned that I was going to ask you about was, for myself personally, as someone who's always been very entrepreneurial, I take so much pride in doing things that most others wouldn't, and I know that they wouldn't. And so I guess my question for you was going to be, what do people like that do? I can see a lot of very successful people having kind of an identity crisis if they were to lose what they built their identity around. But so what you're saying is you think that the whole rules of the game will change, or the game in general will change?
I think that being an entrepreneur is going to be one of the most important things in the future. What do I mean by that? So I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, Dan Sullivan from Strategic Coach, who also lives in Toronto. And we're talking about, would AI take away the drive of doing new things, exploring, building? And, he asked me the question, well, Peter, technology has improved consistently. And as tech has improved, has it slowed you down? Has it stopped you from being entrepreneurial? And my answer was no. I just use whatever the latest technology is to dream bigger dreams, to go bigger and farther. And I think that's an entrepreneurial mindset, that I'm going to use whatever exists to, what else can I do now? That's amazing. What can I do now? What can I do now? And I think we need to teach our kids and everybody to flip the script and be empowered and dream of like, okay, well, now that I have the ability to speak to an AI and say, I want to create this product or service, and it creates it for me. Okay, what do I do with that? And where can I go even further? I think we need to be inspired to become creators. The working title for my next book with Stephen Kotler is We Are as Gods, Survival Guide for the Age of Abundance. And we have to realize that we have become extraordinarily godlike in our abilities, right? What you do between breakfast and lunch is off the charts. Right?
Sure.
You're omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent. You can speak to anyone on the planet in full video for zero additional cost. You can know anything you want. You can talk to AIs. I mean, it's kind of crazy. I have 2 14-year-old boys. When I think about what their life is going to be like over the decade ahead, it's incredibly magical. Scary because we don't know how to predict the future, but magical nonetheless.
Completely. I'm blown away by this stuff so often. I think the scariest part for me was how fast it happened. Because I remember when ChatGPT had its launch moment and it was fun. I played around with it. I saw the utility. But then to see how much faster it got better at everything was pretty staggering because I was so used to even the internet, things did not move like that whatsoever. It was such a slower growth trajectory. And the scariest one for me is video generation.
Yes, VR3, amazing, huh?
It's so amazing, and it's so close to being almost perfect. Like, it's so close. And so when that happens, how do we determine truth when anything can be faked?
The answer is I don't know. And, well, let's take this in two parts. So one, there will be laws passed that counterfeiting truth will carry a heavy sentence, just like counterfeiting money carries a heavy sentence. So there will be requirements for watermarks. There'll be mechanisms, maybe blockchain-related mechanisms to verify that, in fact, yea, verily, this video of Peter and Ben having this conversation is, in fact, real. And as people make, fake news with higher and higher fidelity, when I'm flipping through posts on X, and I look at something and I really do ask, is that real or not? And sometimes you'll take it and put it into Grok and say, is this real or is this fabricated? So we're going to be surrounding the truth with multiple verification angles, like, knowledge that this person was in fact in this place and this video was in fact generated and maps against that. So there are going to be mechanisms by which we can verify that, but it's still going to have a major influence on people. The other side I'm curious about is how all of this is going to hit Hollywood, right? I can imagine very soon we'll see the first VO3 fully generated feature films. And very soon after that, you'll be at home, you'll say, hey, I want to see a version of, a Star Trek episode starring my family members. And I'd like it to it continue with Kirk and whatever. You can describe what you want and then watch that, generated for you on the fly. So I'm not sure how Hollywood truly survives this.
Yeah.
I'm sure they will, but not sure how yet.
Yeah, it's insane to think about what that can mean. And the first place my head went to from a positive perspective is I'm sure that there's a lot of old IPs where either, let's say, the actors passed away or they just couldn't get the money for it, that they could now easily go back and further that story. And I think that's where will be the early winners of this is old IP in terms of video games, et cetera. I think that'll be a very big thing. But in terms of where it stops, that's super interesting. And that's why I was curious to ask you about in terms of the verification piece. But before we move on to the next, I want to talk about crypto next. But before we go there, in terms of jobs in particular, how long do you think, because numbers get thrown around, and I know this is just a guess and an estimate, but how far are we from most white collar jobs being altered at least?
I think we will see. I mean, I'm seeing this right now. I'm chairman of a company called Fountain Life that's in the medical and longevity business. And, we're all of the physicians and the medical teams at Fountain are using AI to help do the integration of gigabits of data, help really do a thorough multimodal analysis and look and understand that patient and understand the different therapeutics out there. But it's the physician is still the quarterback on this, right? And at the same time, the AI is also enabling the individual to do their own diagnostics and get their own second and third digital opinion on this. Will there be a point at which the human gets replaced in medicine? The same thing in education, or the same thing in legal or accounting. And I think for the near term, people still trust people, but there is going to be a point in the near future where it's just so much better that, the user will skip going to the human and go straight to the tech, just like, you might have used a consultant or a researcher or a librarian to get information. And now you Google it or you use Gemini or ChatGPT. So how long? I think we're going to start to see significant beginning of erosion in 2 years. And I think within 5 years, we'll see whatever impact is going to be will be implemented. So 2 to 5 years. And so that's, for me, when I think about the dangers of AI, the time frame of greatest concern for me is that 2 to 5 years, 2 to 7 year time frame. On the back end of that, right, what's it like in 2035 or 2040? I think that AI will have such an overwhelmingly positive impact on society that stabilizing society, stabilizing economies, enabling breakthroughs in medicine and science, that the upside will be far greater than the downside. So it's the near term, 2 to 7 years that has my, the greatest concern.
Totally. Yeah, any sort of radical change, it's always the short term that's the most uncomfortable because we have this deeply rooted thing in us to want to maintain what we previously had, even if it's not better. Just we're used to it and we were still alive in it, so we try to keep it going. But so that's for white collar. Whenever I bring this up around people who don't watch as much AI content as I do and they're not as in the weeds of it, they quickly go to, well, I'm glad I'm in construction, or I'm glad I'm in this field. Robotics, are they evolving at a similar pace, or are they another 2 or 3 years after that 5 that you mentioned?
Yeah, no, we're going to see humanoid robots, not just robotics. We have robotics now. We have autonomous cars. We have Amazon, fulfillment robots and all of that, which are here. But I think the real question is, when are we going to see humanoid robots with, 10 fingers and 2 legs and 2 arms and enter the workforce? And so I track that carefully. I'm an investor in these companies. I do podcasts with the CEOs of these companies. And the reality is the progress they've made in the last 3 years is extraordinary, far more. So humanoid robots have been, a thing for 20 years. They go back 40 or 50, but the last 20 years, there have been real serious attempts. And what's enabled them to really just leapfrog in the last 2 years has been generative AI. So it's not new materials, maybe a little bit better batteries, maybe a little bit better motors, but it's the brains behind these things. So these humanoid robots are going to be driven by the most advanced AI models, right? So we're going to see Tesla bot or Optimists, from Tesla, driven by Grok 4. We're going to see, Figure 2, which is coming out of a company called Figure AI, driven by its latest AI models. OpenAI will drive perhaps a company called 1X Technologies. There are probably about 50 reasonably funded, probably 10 extremely well-funded humanoid robot companies. And we have to remember is half of the global GDP is labor. So the global GDP is about 110 to 115 trillion dollars. Half of that is labor. And so the total addressable market for these robots is like $50 trillion. A lot of money going in.
Wow.
Now, what's interesting, when I interviewed Elon, who I've known for a good part of 25 years, and Brett Adcock, the CEO of Figure, said the same thing. The expectation is that we'll see billions of robots in the 2040s, in the 2030s, as many as 10 billion robots by 2040, right? So more robots than are humans, and that these robots will cost about $30,000 to manufacture, which means you could lease them for $300 a month or $10 a day, right? So, imagine everybody being able to afford a robot in their home that can help you clean the house or take care of the garden or watch your elderly parents. These things are coming and coming quickly.
When everyone has these things, at this point, I'm sure when they reach our homes and they're doing basically everything, we probably have to redefine what jobs to look like. You said that you think it'll evolve and change, but do you have any sort of predictions in terms of what work will be defined as or look like for everybody? Like, will everybody even be working? And if they're not working, what do they do with all the time? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So there are some interesting analogies, during the Renaissance, the great patrons, the super wealthy, didn't work. They were patrons of the art. They supported artists, or they were involved in artists, or they created art. There's a Indian mystic / guru by the name of Sadhguru. I don't know if you know his name. And I was on stage with him years ago, and he said something I'll never forget. He said, listen, Peter, technology is the means by which humanity takes a vacation from survival. So jobs are a recent invention for humans. We didn't have jobs 10,000 years ago. We survived. Right? It was like every day, like, where do I get my food? How do I get shelter? My kid is sick. What do I do for them? How do I keep from being attacked by this tribe or these animals? It was survival. That's what you did every day. And then technology has taken us away from the need for survival. And we end up with this free time. And now we want to be meaningful. We want to be productive. So I think these are important elements we have to be thinking about. So what will you do? Will you travel? Will you educate? Will you create? Will you teach? If your livelihood is taken care of for you? If we're living in a world of abundance, which is what AI and robotics will give us, Elon has spoken about this, Sam Altman has spoken about this, this is what I wrote about in 2012. We're heading to this world of extraordinary abundance where it's not about a world of luxury, but it's a world about possibility where all of your basic needs are being met. So what do you do with your time? How do you create value in your life and the life of the ones you love? So these are the challenges we're going to have in this future of abundance.
Yeah. And the one quote that I go to so often when referring to humans is that up until this point in history, we've been straight survival creatures. We operate on scarcity and staying alive. And it seems like that's at the core of our very programming. It seems like it was a feature and it's now turning into a bug. On that, do you think we integrate with AI or technology to alter that programming?
So I think about that a lot. We are operating on a Paleolithic set of software. Our brains are wired from the savannas of Africa around fear and scarcity. Fear saved our life from predators. Scarcity allowed us to hoard in order to survive the lean months. But we're still operating on fear and scarcity. So what do we do? I do think that we're going to have to work to rewire our neural nets. So I teach this. It's probably one of the most important things I'm going to do. One of my next books is called Mindset Mastery. And it's the notion that your mindset is the most important asset you have. So if you think about the greatest leaders on the planet, whoever they might be, Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Elon, if you like him, Steve Jobs, if you like him, whoever it might be, and you ask yourself the question, what made that person a great leader? What was it? Was it the money they had, the technology they had, the friends they had? Did that make them a great leader? Or maybe, just maybe, was it the mindset they had? And if it was their mindset and you took away everything else from them, but they retained their mindset, my premise is they would continue to be a great leader. In fact, they'd probably regain many things that they lost. And, we talked about AI in the beginning of our conversation here, and you train an AI, you train the neural net of an AI by showing it example after example after example of what you want it to learn. And our brains are neural nets, same as an AI's neural net. And you train our brain by showing it example after example after example. And as you train our brain, it's trained on the conversations you listen to, like someone listening to this podcast. It's trained on the books you read, the television programming you watch, the news you watch. I've stopped watching news. You could not pay me enough money to have some producer, flood my brain with what they think I should be watching. No, thank you. I'll very carefully use, AI filters or follow very specific people on X to understand how they think, because I'm choosing what I want to let into my mind. The same way that when I'm focused on one of my other areas of focus, longevity, I'm very focused on what I let into my body from food. And so how we shape our mindsets for the future, it's going to be very important. And that those mindsets are going to help govern us towards, being curious, being grateful, being able to reset our anticipation of life in this world of AI, robotics, and abundance.
Yeah, the filtering your social media is a very powerful tool because we are not built to have this kind of stuff thrown at us. And as we alluded to earlier, we live in a sensationalized space because that's what sells on social media, and you got to pay the bills, and there's so many people involved. And so it's usually chronically negative, but it's very difficult to avoid that. But I think so many people have been passive consumers, and I don't even think as much of it was malicious as a lot of people like to say that it was. I think it was kind of a byproduct of circumstance where people became very negative. I don't think there was some people behind the scenes going like this. I think a lot of it was just we didn't know what we didn't know, and we couldn't extrapolate far enough to see where this would go. And I think that you nailed the point that mindset is at the core foundation of where we go, positive or negative. I think a lot of people are at a very bad space from a mindset perspective.
Yep.
And how does someone like that, who maybe came into this conversation very negative on AI or just in general, how do they begin to even change that? Because it's so daunting for people.
You change by what you consume, by what podcasts you listen to, by what books you read. And I'm serious. I just do not watch the news. You think about this, I call CNN the Crisis News Network. I don't have a good acronym for Fox, but what's their job? It's deliver every murder, every crooked politician, every problem on the planet into your living room in living color, not once, but over and over and over again. And this just puts you in a state of apoplexy and fear. And you don't need that. I like to say if something's really important for me to know, my mom will tell me, or it'll come in through other mechanisms. But I buy back that hour a day that I used to listen to news, and I use it to actually learn from the people who I respect, the leaders out there. Whether it's my friend Tony Robbins or it's listening to podcasts with other tech leaders, I selectively let this knowledge into my brain to shape the way I think. And having an optimistic mindset about the future is one of the most valuable things you can have. People like hanging with optimists. There was a study done by the National Academy of Sciences that said optimists on a fully equilibrated basis live 15% longer than pessimists. Lots of benefits for being an optimist.
No kidding. Yeah, no, it's so true. You can feel when someone's positive and it's like energetic. We get pulled towards them. And it's the opposite is true if someone's very negative. It's hard to be around them. You feel very drained. And it does take monitoring what you consume. We always so quickly go to what you eat, but what you consume with your eyeballs and your ears is equally, if not more important in terms of shaping how you think and all that. So I think I try to catch myself often by every month or so doing an audit of what I'm consuming. And if you're listening to this, I strongly recommend taking Peter's advice and doing the same. We've got two more subjects here because I know you're almost out of time. So we talked about integrating with technology, and one of my favorite people that talks about this quite often is your friend Ray Kurzweil, who I've read his books and I love him so much. He's so interesting, so unique, and it's been awesome how long he's been saying this stuff and being called crazy, and then now it's coming up and his predictions are wildly accurate. So for his thesis of basically living forever, do you think that's a feasible thing? Like, do you think that's possible?
So I don't need to worry about that right now. What I need to worry about is, can I live the next 50 years?
50, okay.
Right. So what I mean by that is that we're living in a time when AI and biotech is rapidly educating us about human biology. And, we're going to see consistent and constant improvements and extensions of human, not just lifespan, which is how long your heart's ticking, but health span. How long are you vital? How long do you have the energy, the aesthetics, the cognition, the mobility to do what you want to do and love life? And today in the US, I know the numbers, the average lifespan is like 79. The average health span is like 63. You're living the last 16 years of your life in unhealthy hardship and pain. So we want to first off move that up, right? I've got a $101 million X Prize health span working on that with 600 plus teams working on therapeutics to extend your health span and bring it up. But we're seeing the biggest beneficiary or the biggest driver is going to be AI. And you've got folks like Dario Amodei from Anthropic saying we're going to double the human lifespan potentially in the next 10 years. You've got Demis Hassabis from DeepMind, part of Alphabet, saying we have the potential to cure all disease within the next 10 years. I just did a podcast with one of the greatest thinkers in this field, David Sinclair, Harvard Medical School, on my Moonshots podcast. I commend that particular episode to everybody in which he'll walk through the work that he's doing and the potential to reverse aging. All right, so there's a lot of incredible work going on to drive that. AI is the biggest driver of this. So do I think we're going to live forever? Well, I'm not, that's not what my focus is. My focus is, can we live an extra 30 healthy years beyond what we currently do today? And during those 30 healthy additional years, by the way, technology is taking off like this, and that will drive breakthroughs that buy you the next decade, the next 20 years, the next 30 years. And that reaches what we call longevity escape velocity. So I'm glad I'm alive now and not, 100 years ago. Let's put it that way.
Completely. Yeah, no, it's quite a crazy time to even have this topic of conversation as something that is potentially conceivable and not science fiction. I consider myself pretty lucky, even amidst all the chaos, or whether it's real or fake or manufactured, who knows. But a lot of people on the outside, when they do come in, they consume content, it's negative. And much like you mentioned the news, the economy is a massive part of that. And it does seem like the current structure of how we've built the economy does seem like it's on its final legs of where we're going to have to change things quite dramatically in order to prop up the system and make it function. I think crypto is going to play a major role in that. Crypto is a topic of conversation that you guys go on your show quite a bit. You've had people on who are experts in that. If someone's new to the world of crypto, what should they know and how will it impact their life over the next coming years?
I think what they should know is that in particular, Bitcoin has been relatively proven out to the extent that I care about, and the majority of the financially intelligent people care about, that it is a safe and proven mechanism for storing wealth. And especially as we begin to live longer, we're going to see a scenario whereby you want to have a medium of wealth retention that doesn't vaporize away due to inflation or taxation. So I'm very over concentrated on Bitcoin as my primary holding. Over real estate, over stocks, and I believe strongly that it will continue to appreciate against the dollar in a significant fashion.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The more you learn about how the financial system functions, the more pro and bullish I think you'll become on crypto, and that's certainly what I did. The more that I became educated, the more of my stocks that I sold, the more Bitcoin that I bought, and so I'm excited for where it's coming. And I think finally there's enough support realizing that this is going to happen whether you're here or not, and I think hopefully that people get educated fast enough to take advantage. Last question for you, Peter. I really appreciate you giving me your time here.
Of course.
You've talked with Palmer before loosely about the topic of aliens. What was your opinions on extraterrestrials? Do you think they exist? And what's your 2 cents on that whole subject?
Oh my goodness. I hope they exist. So I have never seen any evidence, had any interaction, seen anything in my own eyeballs. What I find fascinating are a couple of points. Number one, we're in a universe that's some 14 billion, let's call it round numbers, 14 billion years old. The highest atomic number element in our body required for biology is iodine, atomic number 56. It came into existence about 1 billion years after the Big Bang. So I believe there are fundamentally I think life is ubiquitous in the universe. I think there are civilizations in the universe, not in our solar system, not in our galaxy, I don't know, that are far more advanced because of, this is a big place, right? We're living in a universe of, last estimate was like 2 trillion galaxies, with every galaxy has 100 billion stars. I mean, there's a lot out there. The other thing I find fascinating is the recent flurry of Army, Navy, Air Force generals and personnel who have gone on camera in Congress saying, hey, this stuff is real, I've seen it, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm blown away by how this is not like front page news and discussion.
I know.
It is crazy. Yeah.
Insane. Well, thank you so much, Peter. I honestly appreciate it.
It's an exciting time to be alive. Anyway,
100%.
Thank you for sharing your audience and allowing me to speak about this. I think
100%.
This is amazing time. I hope everybody, optimism pays off in so many ways.
Completely. Yeah. And thank you for being one of the few optimistic voices in all of this doomsday stuff. So I really appreciate it tremendously, and keep doing everything you're doing.
Pleasure. Take care now.